Good morning. It is Tuesday morning and it's definitely time for a transformation. So, hey, everything I talk about today, we're going to talk about how do you end struggle? How do you end struggle? Everything I talk about are things that I'm doing in my life. So, hopefully, as I go through this, we're going through this together. Hopefully, you can get something from this. So, how do you end struggle? Well, life is certainly full of struggles. I mean, in fact, you can pretty much count on them. It's one after another. But when we look at struggle, there's pain. What's that mean? We experience pain, but it's very short term. It's very acute. We have a problem, we struggle, and then eventually it leaves. Suffering is unrelenting pain. That's long term struggling, meaning, hey, there's that pain. It's not going to go away until we do something massive. We got to change our life right now. And struggling can also be suffering. And that's a problem, right? So I've personally in my life has struggled with pain and suffering in relationships. I mean, I've been married a couple times. They're divorced and then widows. You know, there's short-term pain and there's long-term suffering in those. We've all had financial struggles, whether they're short-term or maybe they last for a year or two. I own my own business, so that is constant. I wouldn't say that's a struggle, but hey, good morning, Bobby Joe. But there's always something we're dealing with. I've struggled acutely with physical injury. Luckily, I'm a chiropractor, so that tends to be more short term. Can anybody relate to any of this? Right? There's people that struggle for decades or their whole life with family problems, and now they struggle with social and peer pressure and things that are going on in the world. So basically, there's always struggle. Why? Because the world is always changing. So if the world is always changing, our resistance to that change is what causes struggling. The world's changing, relationships evolve and change, financial conditions evolve and change, our health evolves and change. So if change is constant and everything in the world is continually changing, then do we want struggle to be constant? I pretty much know what that answer is. Everybody says, no, I don't. But there's only one thing you can change. There's one thing you can change. And what's that? Struggle is nothing more than a perspective. So if we want to stop struggling, what's the emotional meaning that you're assigning, that you are assigning to that condition? And that determines whether you're struggling, whether you experience pain, or whether you experience suffering. So if we don't want to suffer anymore, how do we change our perspective? There's really the big question. And the truth is, I'm going to give you 3 beliefs. Now you live, hey Larry, how's it going? Good morning. You live what you believe. Your life is based on the things, or whether or not you're struggling, whether you're going through pain or whether you're going through suffering, is based on one thing, and that's your belief. So let's go 3 beliefs that determine this. 1, you only ever have one problem in life. And what's that problem? Your level of consciousness. You only have one problem, and that's your level of consciousness. So let's use a metaphor. If you look at an eagle, when an eagle flies at low altitude, they have crows that come and actually land on their back. Can you believe it? A crow will land on the back of an eagle and peck on an eagle. So if an eagle is flying 10 feet above the ground, you got a crow riding on your back, what's their view? All they can view from 5 or 10 feet off the ground is what's in front of them right now. That's your struggle. What's your struggle? You're focusing on the problem. You don't have a big picture view. You can't develop a great solution, or certainly you got this crow pecking on the back of your neck. So what do you're irritated, and that's the struggle. So what does an eagle do? They've raised their altitude. Crows can't fly at a higher altitude. That's a metaphor for raise your consciousness. Tap into your divinity if you know how to do that. If you don't, go to youaremorepowerful.com. That'll show you, give you exercises how to do that. Get the meditations. We raise our consciousness, and then what's our view? Man, we get a big picture view. We turn into a visionary. All of a sudden, we see all the options, and then we're no longer struggling. So what's the first problem? The first problem of struggle is your level of consciousness. What's the second problem? Second problem is called cognitive bias. What's that mean? Our strongest, right from Tony Robbins, our strongest human need is to remain consistent with who we believe we are. We want to remain consistent with who we believe we are. Well, how does that happen? That's the strongest human need. Well, our beliefs are based on our past events and our past experiences. So why do we want to hang on to that? Because that consistency of who we believe we are, maintaining consistency gives us safety. It satisfies our need for survival. And then what do? We keep repeating our past, which is why we stay stuck in struggle. Why? Because our most primary human need is certainty. So we will hang on to who we believe we are. And even though we don't like struggling, we'll stay at that, 5 foot, 10 foot altitude like that eagle because, hey, at least we're familiar with it. And that's the way our human mind works. And that's happening massively out in the world. Even though the CDC now says masks are ineffective, we don't need masks anymore. You still see people wearing masks outside everywhere. Why? Because they got to be consistent. That's cognitive bias. So struggle is a product of A, your level of consciousness, and B, cognitive bias to stay at that level of consciousness because that's where your certainty is. So if you want something different, if you don't want to struggle anymore, if you want to end struggle in your life and finally have more internal peace, and what's that really mean? You're being called to change your mind. Isn't that fascinating? You're being called to change your mind. Well, how do we do that? Well, Alan Cohen, Course in Miracles Made Easy. We try to change the world. What's that mean? We try to change the problems we're struggling with when what we're really being called to do is to change our mind, to raise our consciousness, to get above world problems and realize that we're divine first from the inside out. So how do we do that? How do we change our mind to end struggling? I know that's the question you're asking. That's the title. Will you transform struggle into gratitude? Oh man, how do we do that? Now I know people like, oh yeah, I understand gratitude. Yup, I write my gratitude journal. Yup, before my feet hit the floor, I name 3 things I'm thankful for every day. Hey, you know what? Here's why affirmations don't work. If you don't believe it, you can do it like an act or like a task, but until you experience it in your body, until you feel it, if you don't live it, you don't know it. That's it. So what do people say? Okay, I know gratitude. 3 words that stop all learning, that keep you in your lower consciousness, that your cognitive bias is going to say, so you don't create new things in your life, are 3 words. What are they? I know that. So when I know that. So when I say gratitude, like, oh yeah, I've heard that before. Hey, do you live it? What are you struggling with in your life? So how do we move from struggle into gratitude? Well, here's what happens. Do you have the belief that everything in your life happens for a reason? Do you have that belief system? Because if you do, that means everything happens for a reason, regardless, every event in your life, regardless how bad it is, regardless of how violated you feel, regardless of how bad that other person hurt you, if you believe everything happens for a reason, then there's a gift in that event. So we can't sit there and say that everything happens for a reason, but that person hurt me and this sucks and this is happening and this is happening to me. They don't match. You can't have one belief and not find the gift in every event, no matter how bad. Well, how do we find the gift? Well, when you also believe that everything happens in your life is guiding you toward your soul purpose, that whatever happens in your life is building you courage for the next step in life in your purpose, that everything that happens in life is building your faith in God, that everything that happens in life is getting you out of your ego. It's almost forcing you to raise your consciousness, because what are the 2 things that keep you in struggle? Your level of consciousness and cognitive bias. It's forcing you to get out of your cognitive bias. It's forcing you to find new belief systems. It's forcing you to have faith. It's forcing you to get out of your ego, and it's forcing you to move that 18 inches from your mind and your heart. And this is what challenges do. So when you believe that it's giving me a gift, it's giving me courage, it's giving me faith, it's causing me to grow from the inside out, Man, what did you learn? Now we get out of struggle. We get into gratitude. We find the gift. It changes our mind. We raise our consciousness. Then struggle is gone. I do a podcast, me and my buddy, Dr. Doug DeSiena, Resurrecting Our Freedom. Go to resurrectingourfreedom.com. And we just interviewed a woman that we're going to be releasing. She was abused by her father from childhood. I mean, physically, verbally, emotionally. And she didn't say this, but it may be sexually from her father through decades. So through all this pain, she becomes an addict, right? Then she gets through addiction. Then she gets married. And of course, who does she marry? Repeat the pattern. Somebody that took care of her, all these things, now is very abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive. I mean, bad, physically abusive, like not just being hit, but being beaten. She finally escapes out of the house, is living in her car, homeless for months, till someone takes her in her house, helps her rebuild her life. And now what does she do? She found her soul purpose. Now what does she do? She helps abused women. And here's what she says on the interview. I wouldn't trade 1 second of decades of abuse to be able to do what I do right now. In other words, her life is so fulfilled. She's helped so many people, women, transform their life, take their kids, help them get jobs, help them become emotionally stable, get off alcohol and drugs, that she would say, I wouldn't trade 1 second of the suffering and struggle and pain and abuse in my life for what I'm doing now. That's gratitude. Isn't that amazing? So what's your belief? Well, our belief isn't asking the question, why am I struggling? A more empowering belief and a more empowering question is, what am I learning that my soul is evolving through this human experience that's guiding me toward my soul purpose? So what am I learning that's creating a conscious evolution more towards my divinity than my humanity, that's making a contribution to the lives of others? What's the gift it's giving me? Because there's a reason that it's here to help me evolve to the next level of consciousness. And then the third question, what am I going to do? So it's not, why am I struggling? It's, what am I learning? Move me toward my purpose. What gift is this giving me that's evolving my soul and has a benefit? And what am I going to do now that's going to impact the world now that I have a new consciousness? So gratitude transmutes struggle, pain, and suffering into gratitude, from struggle into gratitude, peace, grace, making you more powerful than you've ever been, because that's the evolution of our soul. That's the evolution of our consciousness. So we turn fear and pain and struggle into love, appreciation, and gratitude. Now you can fulfill your purpose on a higher level. Now you can contribute to humanity. Now that you made it from pain and suffering and struggle into gratitude, now you can tell your story. Now you can help other people that are struggling with the same problems. And now we really can create heaven on earth. Okay, you guys. Love you guys. Thanks so much. See you next week. Please share this. There's so much struggle in the world. Please just share this on your timeline. All right. Love you guys. Thanks.